Almost 20 years ago, I tried to get my dad to play Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, in hopes that he would enjoy it as much as I did. After about a minute, he said he didn't like it, and that the ability to run on walls was too unrealistic. Well, fast forward to today, and I have tasked myself with making this game 100% more realistic. Can we beat Prince of Persia: Sands of Time without wall running? Let's find out. Here are the rules, but first, did you know that over 80% of you guys who watch these videos aren't subscribed? That's a lot, and if you're watching the videos anyway, it would mean a lot to me if you did subscribe too. Thank you so much. Back to the rules. Rule number 1, absolutely no wall running at any point. We're aiming for realism after all. Rule number 2, glitches are fine, just no hacking. And rule number 3, once we defeat the Vizier, the final boss of the game, we win! Also, we will be playing the PC version of the game for this challenge, for reasons that will become clear soon. Just to show you an example of what wall running is, this is a vertical wall run, and this is a horizontal wall run. Since this game is very heavy on platforming, both of these wall run abilities are used extensively throughout the game to reach either high ledges or cover large gaps. Also, once we're in the game, we have to go into the game's advanced graphic settings and disable VSync. Disabling this setting will be helpful for pretty much the entire run, so we do this right at the beginning. We start the game in the middle of a battle. We can climb up these steps, but we run into a high ledge at the very early going. Without running up this wall, there is no other intended way to progress this game. This is going to become a running theme. I messed around in this small area for a long time trying to find a way up. I tried all sorts of things, but no luck. I did somehow manage to make the prince invisible though. I don't know why this works, but it's consistent. We can undo this by pressing the first person view button. Hey, if we didn't see the wall run, we can't prove it happened, right? Nah, don't worry, I won't cheat like that. We need to think of another way up. Just give me some time. I'm sure we'll come up with something, but for now, we'll continue the rest of the run whilst we think. We drop down, and after defeating some enemies, the game gives us a quick wall run tutorial, but we can actually clear both of these gaps with regular long jumps. Once we're inside, we use the pillars to climb to the upper floor, and here is where we see our next major hurdle. These gaps are way too wide to jump over, so wall running is very intended. If we fall down, we are able to climb back up on the side we started on thanks to these thin ledges that the prince can stand on. In fact, it is these thin ledges that are going to help us with a glitch. If you enter the first person view in this game and then slowly nudge the left analog stick in certain directions, the prince will rotate on the spot. When just standing on the ground, this is very normal, but this also works in other situations where the prince should not be able to turn around on the spot. These include situations like hanging on edges or climbing ladders. Most of the time, this will just result in the prince falling off whatever he's holding on to. However, an exception to this is when he's standing on these thin ledges up against walls. Normally on these ledges, we can only move side to side as we hug the wall. If we approach the corner as far as we can go, we use this first person trick and nudge the left stick slightly to rotate on the spot. It has to be a slight nudge since it only works when moving slowly. If we keep performing this rotation, it's possible to rotate the prince enough times until he is going through the wall. This can be quite tricky to get the hang of at first. The sequence tends to be turn away from the wall, rotate on the spot, and then turn away from the wall again. Then rotate on the spot again, rinse repeat. We can see that the more we do this, the more we clip through the wall. Eventually, as we enter first person, we can see out of bounds. If we do this for long enough, we will be standing in mid-air, as if we were hugging an invisible wall. Only when we manage to get far enough away from the starting ledge does the game then allow us to start walking through the air. We're still treated as if we're on that thin ledge hugging a wall though, so we can only walk in two directions back and forth. However, we can use the first person trick once more to rotate on the spot, and now we have changed direction. We can even clip straight through walls when doing this. From now on we'll call this the walk in air. It looks like we can use this to just travel to the end of any given level, but it's not that simple. This game is full of load triggers. We need to hit the vast majority of these load triggers throughout the game, otherwise later parts of the level just won't load in. Basically, there's very little sequence breaking we can do right now, so we use this trick to follow the level's main path until we clip into the next room. This bypasses those wall runs from earlier. Since we're partway into the ground, the prince raises his legs to try and stand on the ground, and now he's performing the crab dance. We can make our way into the upcoming corridor. Jumping backwards gets us out of the walk-in air state, and from here we travel back to the beginning of the corridor to hit a load trigger. This load trigger activates a cutscene in which we see several traps, but if we hadn't done that, the area following this corridor wouldn't have loaded in. Almost the whole game works like this, so it's just a matter of knowing where to stand to activate the cutscenes we need. We need to skip another wall run right away though, so we can use the exact same trick to walk in air. We follow the main routes whilst underneath the platforms until we emerge out of bounds on the other side. From here we can rotate to change direction and head towards the giant statue. Normally we would have to scale this statue with a few wall runs, but with the walk in air we are already level with the statue's head. We need to get on top of the head so we can rotate once more and position ourselves to the side of the head with our backs to the wall. We need to make sure that we are not too close to the wall, as we need to jump backwards and kick off it. A few wall jumps later and we can reach the Dagger of Time. The foundation is starting to crumble around us and there are big gaps in the floor. We're supposed to wall run, but it's actually just possible to grab the edges with 2 long jumps. We need to aim our jumps perfectly, as we only just make the first jump by mere pixels. We dodge some more traps and get back to the hourglass, stick the Dagger of Time into it, and then all hell breaks loose. We defeat the sand creatures and make our way to the next challenge. It's here we learn that the prince cannot survive even moderately high falls, but by using the Dagger of Time we can reverse time to undo such mishaps. Right now we can only use the dagger 4 times, which is represented by these 4 sand chambers. We're supposed to wall run to the broken stairs below if we want to get down safely, but instead we can just hang over the edge on the other side and drop down to grab this pole. We will find a sand cloud down here, and we're going to want as many of these as we can find. Not only do they refill all our sand chambers, but for every 8th sand cloud we find, we get an additional sand chamber. From the floor we can reach the poles to swing to the next part of the room, but now we come to a big gap. It's time to learn our first rewind glitch. We can manipulate the time rewind ability to store certain actions. If we rewind time during an action, like at the end of a long jump for example, and then stop rewinding partway through the jump, and then do it again, we store the initial long jump. The prince will then immediately perform another long jump in mid-air after we stop rewinding that second time. We need to make sure that we stop rewinding at the same time twice in a row, right when the prince is halfway through the long jump. We will call this trick the double jump from now on, and we can use it twice in this room to clear both of these gaps. It's important to remember that it requires the use of 2 sand chambers for every rewind trick, double jumps included. So the double jumps we use to get here use up all 4 of our sand chambers, but there also happens to be a sand cloud right after this room, so we get a refill immediately. We will need to be mindful of our sand usage and conserve as much as we can for when we absolutely need it. The next room would be a big challenge, except right outside the room there is a rock with a thin edge that we can stand on. We get another walk in air using this ledge, but there is a way of doing this with another rewind trick. If we use the same method as before, but this time the action is a normal vertical jump, we can suspend ourselves in mid-air but still hugging the wall. Now we can freely move where we want, just like the walk in air from before. We progress through the next room and go straight to the exit. We can use the other side of the same rocks to land safely back on the ground, since we are a bit high up. There's 2 more sand clouds ahead for another refill. Following the cutscene where we bump into Pharah, we fight some more scarabs, and then we find another sand cloud in the corridor behind us. The following room looks like a bed chamber, and we need to get to the bottom of it. We head out to the balcony first to activate a cutscene, but then we head back inside the room. We can use a double jump to skip the balcony. Feel free to use all 4 sands for this double jump if needed, as we can jump over to another sand cloud right afterwards. One more double jump allows us to grab this pillar and slide all the way to the bottom. We grab the sand cloud and now we want to jump to the structure surrounding the bed below. It's tough to get the angle right, as we weren't really meant to stand on top of this, but once we get it, we can roll off down to the bed and land safely on the ground floor. I'll mention now that killing the sand creatures refills our sand chamber. 1 sand chamber per sand creature. Keep this in mind just in case there aren't any sand clouds nearby, or if we've already used all the sand clouds nearby. We move a bookcase to reveal a secret passage, except in our case, the area behind the bookcase hasn't loaded in. If we walk out there, we'll just fall into the void and die. This likely happened due to the method that we used to get down here, which must have skipped a load trigger. Thankfully, there is a save point in this room, so we can just save the game and then reload. The corridor behind the bookcase is now loaded in. We will need another double jump right afterwards though to get around this intended wall run, and immediately following that we find a sand cloud, which gives us our 5th sand chamber. From now on, I'll only mention the important sand clouds. We'll just make sure to grab as many as we find along the way. There's a blocked bridge in the next room and the game wants us to wall run to get around it, but we can just use a double jump to reach the other side. The forced camera angle ends up making this jump harder than it should be, so it did take a few tries. We moved a block on the button to open the door, but we can use this block to test out another first person trick. If we grab the block, go into first person view, and then gently nudge the left stick to rotate, the prince will warp to the other end of the room until he hits a wall. What's more, the block comes with him. We can even get the prince to rotate whilst holding the block with this trick, and this will rotate the prince with the block. This means we can rotate the block at such an angle where the prince can grab it but have his back to the open door, whilst still on the button. If we perform the first person warp now, we go straight through the door with the block. We're supposed to pull a lever to create a bridge to the center platform, but we can just use the same first person trick to warp us and our block there instead. We can solve the puzzle here as normal, although the block remains suspended in mid-air as we lower the center platform. After we solve the puzzle, we try to take our block with us to the next area, but we found that we can't push blocks up flights of stairs, and then it disappeared right in front of our eyes. It's still there, we just can't see it anymore. I suppose the game didn't like us taking the block where it didn't belong, although it was worth it to see the prince do this dance on top of it. We quickly make it through the corridor of traps, with no wall runs required, and we enter the courtyard. There are several enemies here, and also there is a button high on the wall. To press this, we're supposed to run up the wall towards it. Of course, this means we need another way. Instead, we can use another trick, the damage boost. If the prince gets hit in the lower body right as he is jumping upwards, we can get damage boosted quite high up. A regular damage boost won't cut it though. We can use another one of our time abilities to our advantage. By tapping the rewind button instead of holding it, we can temporarily slow down time. Not only does this help us with timing the jump for the damage boost, but this also greatly increases the height we can get. Fortunately, there is a sand cloud in the courtyard to top us up before we try this. We stand in front of the wall with the button on it, but a few steps back. We need to start slowing down time as the enemy approaches, and then jump right before we get hit. It's easier if we kill all but one enemy first, but after much practice, we were finally able to get the timing down, and we flew up to the ledge above. We first need to walk to the left to activate these traps, and then get by them again. This ensures that the load triggers are being activated in the order they normally would. Now, instead of the intended wall run, we can use a double jump to reach the ladder hanging over the spike pit. There's a sand cloud after this for another refill. We now want to use another walk in air. There is a thin ledge right above these spikes. This path actually leads to a secret area that would increase the prince's maximum health. But we don't want to access this area in this run. The reason being, if we receive this health upgrade, this opening in the wall will then disappear, and the thin ledge along with it. Instead, we use the thin ledge for a walk in air. We want to walk along the path that we would normally have taken in a casual run to ensure that all the future locations load in properly. If we're angled right, we can jump back to this thin ledge and pole swing our way to the upper floor. There is a small thin ledge up here too, and we want to use it for another walk in air. But we can achieve this in a slightly different way, with yet another rewind trick. We need to perform a few specific actions in a row, so here we go. We jump back to land on this small ledge below. We jump on the spot twice, but during the second jump, we rewind time until we are partway through the first jump again. Now we rewind time again until we are partway through the long jump. We need to stop rewinding right when we're halfway through the jump. The timing can be tricky. If we time it right, we will be walking in air once more. This method of the rewind trick for a walk in air helps for when we can't get into a corner on these thin ledges. Once again, we need to travel the intended path to hit all the load triggers, and since we can walk through walls like this, we can also walk through the door. We can even carry on walking in the air to get over this big hole to avoid a wall run. We can jump back into the button on the wall and kick off it to proceed the level. This also avoids a vertical wall run. The first time I got to this section, the area above hadn't loaded properly, and I was essentially platforming blind. It all loaded in on the second attempt though, as we can now see what it should look like. We can use another walk in air to clear the next big hole, as there is a thin ledge next to it. We continue to go through the door as well, and this kicks off a fight against the Sand King and his guards. Defeating them also refills our sand. The next level is the most difficult one so far. We start by jumping over these wooden roofs, and we can see several enemies on the big roof ahead, but we don't want to kill them all. We quickly run up to the sand cloud, and then we run over to where the bridge falls in front of us. It's intended that we use several wall runs to make our way along this big wall, and eventually we can drop down to the big bridge far below. We can use a double jump to the next ledge, but this prompts Pharah to follow us, and she will start getting attacked by the sand creatures that we left behind. We kept them alive for a reason though, and we'll see why later. We don't want Pharah to follow us just yet, so instead we're going to bypass the intended route and go straight to the big bridge below. A double jump won't reach it, but even if it did, the fall would still kill us. However, there is a move the prince can use in combat if our sword is out. We can kick off the wall for a wall launch. This gives good distance and momentum, so if we position ourselves with our back to the bridge, we can launch off the wall towards the bridge. If the enemies interfere, we can hang over the edge to de-aggro them. We can also use first person to get a precise angle on the wall launch. We had it so that the right side of the window in the background was almost in line with the right side of our screen. That should help you out if you're playing in widescreen. Now for the hard part. After we launch, we will fall to our death. When we see our health bar deplete, rewind time until we are at the end of the launch animation. Do this twice in a row and we should get increased momentum, just like with a double jump. This still isn't quite enough, so we'll need to do the same again with another double rewind, but we need to stop that rewind a bit closer to the ledge we're trying to reach this time. This is essentially a triple jump, but the forward momentum comes from a wall launch instead of a jump. I failed this trick so many times. This is legitimately the closest I ever came to quitting a challenge run, but one day, after literally weeks of attempts, we finally nailed the landing perfectly. Using a launch initially when performing this trick seems to remove the fall damage too. Now, because we got down here in an unintended way, we skipped a low trigger that prompts Pharah to follow us. This also means that the sand creatures we left alive won't be able to attack her, and instead they will still be aggroed to us. Since they can teleport escort, they're able to follow us down here on the bridge. This is perfect, as we need a damage boost to reach the lever above us. It took all 5 sand chambers to get down here, but there just so happens to be a sand cloud down here too. We damage boost up to the lever, rotate it to open the next door, but since we skipped Pharah's loading trigger, the inside is deloaded. Conveniently, pulling this lever is also a checkpoint, so if we death abuse now, we reload right here and the rest of the level is now loaded. We head inside the tower, and after defeating all the enemies within, we make the climb to the top with some wall jumps and pole swings. There is a button on the wall here and we're supposed to wall run over it to press it, but if we perform a long jump next to the button, it still gets activated. Now we need to use 2 sand chambers to double jump over this spike pit. This leads us to a door, and we can open it with another button. This door leads out to the enemies that we left alive at the start of the level. This also prompts Pharah to come over to us, but our presence here aggroes the enemies again. Now, instead of following us, Pharah will try to shoot arrows at the sand creatures. We need Pharah to come through the door and for the enemies to follow. The rest of the enemies will start to teleport in this section to try and attack us. We want Pharah to move on to the next section, but without killing all the enemies. This is because we want to use them for sand refills later. There are actually 2 waves of enemies here. Once we defeat the first wave, the second wave will start to spawn after a few seconds. So here's the plan. During the fight, we approach this locked door. Normally, this would prompt Pharah to squeeze through the gap and open the door from the other side. However, she's distracted by the enemies. We then kill all but 1 enemy. This gives Pharah only 1 single target. We can stab this last enemy with the dagger to stun him in place, so he cannot move. We don't want to kill this enemy yet, as this will spawn the second wave. Instead, we position ourselves between the enemy and Pharah. If Pharah can't see the enemy, she will instead do what she's prompted to do earlier and squeeze through the gap. We then kill the last enemy and wait for the second wave to spawn. As soon as they do, we move on through the door that Pharah opened for us and enter the warehouse. Since we killed a few sand creatures earlier, we have all 5 sand chambers again. We now need to use another interesting trick. The long jump can only be performed in certain circumstances. For example, if the prince is running towards an edge, we can long jump over the edge. Otherwise, he'll just do a forward roll. If we go to run over an edge, but very quickly change direction and jump at the same time, our long jump will be redirected. This is going to help us reach this high up lever without a wall run. We redirect our long jump towards the wall, but the prince won't kick off the wall unless we get more height on the jump. However, we can just use a double jump to hit the wall even higher. That allows us to kick off the wall and grab the lever. Pharah pulls her lever and we need to use a corridor to loop back around to where we started. We dodge some traps and then we find ourselves back in the previous area with the same spike pit. We perform another double jump to get across, and now we aggro that second wave of sand creatures that we left alive before. Since we used 2 rewind tricks since our last sand refill, we can use the enemies here to get maximum sand again, which is exactly why we needed to lure the enemies here. Once we refill our 5 sand chambers again, we can go back to the start of the warehouse and jump over to where Pharah is. Sometimes her animation bugs out like this. I had to restart this whole section when this happened to me. We need to use a double jump to grab onto the edge of this bridge, and thankfully we can reach the next lever with a normal vertical jump. From here we can get down to the platform above the bottom floor of the warehouse as normal. We ended up falling down to the bottom floor from here, so we kill all the enemies and fully heal ourselves with some nearby water. We're going to need some health for the next trick, so top up here if you need to. Using the movable boxes we can reach another sand cloud and climb up these stack of boxes. Instead of wall running to get back up to where Pharah is, we can double jump from here. There is a button way up high. Not only would you normally need to use the movable boxes to raise the platform, but a wall run would also then be needed. Instead, Pharah is going to help us get a damage boost. That's right, even Pharah's attacks can cause damage boosts if we time the slowdown and the jump just right. If we attack Pharah 3 times, we will aggro her, and she will fire 1 arrow at us. If we quickly hug the wall before she fires the arrow, slow down time, and then jump so that the arrow hits our legs, we get a crazy damage boost. Being this close to the wall ensures that the button is activated as we get close to it. Unfortunately, we don't take full damage from damage boosts. Just be sure to get through the door quickly though before it closes on you. Since Pharah runs through right away, we won't get another shot at the damage boost. There's a sand cloud at the very start of the following area. the Sultan's Zoo. We're able to climb up and swing over the wall without any wall runs. And now we need to climb on top of the giant cage. Thankfully, it's all long jumps and pole swings, but near the top, it's intended that we run up the rock wall and then kick off it to grab a tree branch. We need to use the long jump redirect again, along with a double jump trick to get enough height on the wall to kick off. This was a bit trickier than the other redirect from the warehouse, possibly due to the small space we have to work with, but we got it eventually. We can make our way back down easily too. There is a lever high up, but since there's a pillar right next to it, we can just use that to reach it instead of wall running. After defeating a few scarabs, we need to use another damage boost to reach a very high lever. It's possible we could have double jumped to the lever, but at this point we're in the habit of conserving our sand as much as possible, just in case. Also, we killed Pharah here because we didn't realise how low her health was. Whoops. We reload and get the damage boost the second time. The following corridor is very difficult. We're on a time limit to reach the end, and there's several traps blocking our way. The biggest obstacle is the second spike pit. We're supposed to wall run to get over it, and normally we would get around this with a double jump. But we actually need to save our sand for the following area, so here's how we're going to get by this. As we approach the second pit, we need to long jump diagonally towards the middle of the left wall so that we land between the two saw blades. We then kick off this wall, with the hope being that we will hit the wooden plank on the opposite side in just such a way that it rotates us slightly. We only get this rotation if we hit the very left edge of the plank. It's all to do with how precisely we can hit that left wall with the first jump. We failed this dozens of times, and it's only made more difficult by the fact that we're on a time limit. But finally, we did manage to pull it off. And then we got spiked right before the door. We still just managed to roll under the door in time. The following area sees us scaling some cliffs, so this will be why we needed to save our sand. First of all, the first gap requires a double jump, so that's 2 sand chambers gone already. We climb this tree trunk to reach the cliff top. We can see that a long wall run is intended here. We try to double jump, but we still fall short, so instead we will be using a new trick, and it's done by using the tree trunks. If we kick off a tree trunk towards a wall, hit the ground, jump on the spot, rewind that jump for a second, jump again, but then rewind during that jump, and then rewind all the way until we kicked off the tree, it's possible to store the tree climbing action in midair. This results in us grabbing an invisible tree. Sometimes we face the same problem as a walk in air, in that we simply can't move from this spot, just like we did back in the courtyard. Once we get the timing right though, we can freely climb up and down this invisible tree with no height restrictions. The camera doesn't really want to follow us though. We can use a first person trick from here to achieve horizontal movement, similar to how we rotate on thin ledges. Whenever we go into first person view like this, the camera zooms in on the tree since the game still kind of thinks that's where we are. After each attempt at a rotation, we can pan the camera out to see where we are. Our goal is the cliff on the right side where we can see a sand cloud. It takes a while, but we finally get close enough to where the prince just automatically grabs the ledge. This sand cloud is very convenient too, as it took all our sand just to get here, and this also gave us our 6th sand chamber. We climb more trees to reach the lever high above, and right after using it to open the door, we climb down some trees, and we need to do one more double jump to get back to where the open door is. The next area is the baths, and early on there's a tough section where we press a button and then we must use wall jumps to climb back up. We can't start wall jumping without first running up the wall. We tried to use a redirected long jump like we did in the warehouse and the zoo, but then we remembered something. Back in the first part of the baths, there's a sand cloud on a high up ledge. Normally, we would have to solve a lengthy block puzzle to reach this, but we can just use a damage boost from either an enemy or Pharah. I used an enemy this time since I didn't want to weaken Pharah too much. Just don't move this big vase, or Pharah will go through the crack behind it, and then we can't use her for damage boosts in this area. Speaking of damage boosts, that's exactly what we want to use to reach the next floor up. There is a thin ledge up here, so we use a rewind trick like we've already used to get another walk in air. The height we have allows us to walk over the traps and through the doors. We take the door that leads upstairs, and the prince shows us the dance of his people. We go through the wall, and now we are above the second part of the baths. we are able to reach the new sword upgrade earlier than is intended, and the cutscene of us grabbing it actually triggers Pharah to spawn in this room, since normally you couldn't be here without letting Pharah squeeze through that gap earlier. We need to get back down to the bottom floor quickly as Pharah is being ambushed. This new sword allows us to break weak walls and doors, so we run downstairs to save Pharah. After the battle, if we walk close to the intended entrance to this area, it plays a cutscene that would normally introduce this room. It ends with a quick shot of the new sword, and it was just amusing that it shows an empty altar if we already have the sword. Now we need to press this button without running up the wall. There's another way to use the rewind trick to our advantage. If we take out our sword and double tap the jump button as we move towards a wall, the prince will kick off the wall in an arc. This is intended to be used to vault over enemies' heads. But that twist the prince does in mid-air also kinda changes the way the prince faces. Using a rewind trick in a similar way to the double jump, we can store this vault action and time it when the prince is twisting. This can redirect the stored vault action towards the button and activate it. This allows us to grab another sand cloud. We break a nearby wall and make our way underground. We start by moving this platform to reveal Pharah's crawl space, and then instead of using that platform to run up the wall as is intended, we're going to use it to double jump over this gap instead. We can reach a platform with a sand cloud on it without issue, and soon we come to this long gap with platforms that alternate sides. They could easily have spread these platforms apart just enough where wall running would have been required, but thankfully they're all close enough to each other where we can just long jump over all of them. The following room has its bottom floor divided into an upper and lower level. Pharah stands at the top of the stairs, but if we stand on this fallen rubble, she descends the stairs and stays there. We can't reach the poles above us without running along the wall, but we can use a damage boost to reach both a sand cloud above and the next floor up. We had to use a double jump to get to the door that leads outside, but here is where we run into an issue. After some pole swinging, we're supposed to use a wall run to reach the next floor. We might have been able to reach it with a redirected long jump into a double jump, but it would have been very difficult. So instead, we reload the game back to the start of the area, where Pharah is back at the top of the stairs. We want her to be on the upper level because we need her help with a couple of damage boosts. The first one is right above her, as this helps us get that same sand cloud again from before. Getting back down is harder than you'd think. The prince really can't take much fall damage, so we ended up using the nearby thin ledge to walk in air and then jump down to the upper level from here. The camera zoomed all the way out when we did this for some reason, but it fixed itself once we hit the ground. The second damage boost we need is closer to where we first entered, but Pharah won't follow us there, so we just push her there instead, which works great. After the damage boost, we pull a lever to reveal a ladder. This allows Pharah to follow us up here. She crawls under a gap in the door, and then lets us into the room. Now we need yet another damage boost to reach the high lever. This lowers the drawbridge outside, but since we got to this level in an unintended way, the door next to us that leads outside is not open. But we can now use the intended route to get outside instead. We climb back down to the bottom of the room. We use a double jump to reach the first pole, and we climb up as intended from there. It was now we realised that we didn't need to damage boost to reach the sand cloud, since we could have just gotten it on the way up. Regardless, one final double jump gets us back to the door we were at before. As soon as we walk through, because the drawbridge is already lowered, the game just skips straight to both the prince and Pharah being outside. We win a lengthy fight on the drawbridge, which refills our sand chambers, and continue on. We're inside a tower, and the idea is to reach the top. We can use a series of levers to both rotate and raise a broken bridge in the middle of the room. The intention is that Pharah will ride the broken bridge upwards when we raise it, and the prince will then have to parkour his way up there, naturally. We tried to use damage boosts here, but for some reason, after we aggro Pharah, she shoots the ground instead of us. We don't know why. We assume it's due to the area we're in, but that's why we didn't use damage boosts here. We start by double jumping to the first lever, and use it to rotate the bridge away from us so Pharah can get onto it. Since the bridge is now too far away from us, we can't get off this platform without falling and dying. Pharah will then use the bridge to reach another lever, which raises the bridge up a level. Without being able to run up the wall next to us, we can't climb up to continue the puzzle. At this point, we're pretty much soft locked, but after restarting the level, we had a plan. After Pharah gets off the bridge and makes her way to the next lever, we climb on top of the nearby rubble for some extra height, and then quickly perform a very tough double jump to land on top of the bridge. What makes this so difficult is that we need to clear the chain fence on the bridge, otherwise the prince will just fall. Now we just wait for Pharah to pull the lever and we will rise up with the bridge. From here we want to jump to the hole in the wall to activate both a cutscene and a load trigger, but we don't want to fall down. Instead, we turn around and jump back to the bridge. We can see the ladder on the opposite side of the bridge, which is our ultimate goal, and whereas you would normally need to perform a bunch of parkour to reach it, we can actually just use a double jump from here. It's very close though. It barely even looks like we touched the ladder at all, but we just grabbed it. After helping Pharah up with a ladder, this level is complete. It took all 6 sand chambers to perform the 3 double jumps that we needed to beat that section, so it's lucky that there's a sand cloud just behind this save point. It's also worth noting that we'll be separated from Pharah for the foreseeable future. We start to descend and climb our way to the wall kick section, but then the ground starts to break away from under us. We're supposed to run up this wall on the left to avoid falling, but all we can do is stand there and wait for death. Instead, we can use a rewind trick on the thin ledge before the wall kicks and get a walk in air. We follow the main route around the building until we reach a roof that we're not supposed to be able to stand on. We jump back to land on this roof, as landing anywhere else will kill us. It looks like we're trapped up here as there's nowhere to jump to or drop down to without dying. We do need to get down though. We can see a small recess below that the prince can grab onto. Since this roof wasn't meant to be stood on, we can't perform a long jump over the edge. The game seems to not allow long jumps from out of bound areas like this. We don't need to jump though. If we roll over the edge towards the recess and then use a rewind trick in the same way as a double jump, we can get some forward momentum from the stored roll animation and just reach the recess. From here we can jump back to the ledge beneath the roof for another sand cloud. It's possible to continue the level as normal from here. However, since we skipped the section with the crumbling floor, the following area is not loaded in properly. Trying to stand in areas that are not fully loaded in can have some strange floaty effects on the prince, and when he bumps into a wall like this, well, let's just say I wish I could unsee that. Seriously, he was at this for ages. So instead, we backtrack to where the ground breaks. We can't get there normally, so here's how we did it. We kick off from a hanging position and use a double jump to reach this thin ledge. We use a rewind trick from here to walk in air, and we stand above the crumbling ground. Now, we can take advantage of how the game loads in new areas. If we touch a load trigger and then rewind time to before we touch the load trigger, the trigger still keeps the new areas loaded in, regardless of the rewind. Knowing this, we jump down to the start of the crumbling ground, run across it to the left, and then rewind time until we're back to walking in air. Now, we've hit the load trigger and we can move around again in the air. If we navigate towards the top of the wooden platform, we then trigger Pharah showing up on the balcony. If we turn the camera, we can even see where she walks off and disappears. From here, we return to that second sand cloud and then proceed to the next area as normal. As this area is now loaded in properly, we can see that we are supposed to wall run towards this flagpole. We want to use the last 2 sand in our chambers to double jump to that flagpole instead. But it was here we found out that trying to use a rewind trick from crumbling platforms like we're doing here is very difficult, as the game just warps the prince back to where we jumped from. The double jump is still possible, the timing is just a bit stricter, but once we get it, we can swing over to the save point. This entire next section can be fully traversed without wall running, and there's even a sand cloud at the bottom that we will need. It's intended that we pull a lever to raise a wooden door, and then we use a wall run into some wall jumps and then quickly run across the wooden wall to the other side. But since we're able to refill our sands, we can just bypass all of that with a double jump. This leads us to an underground cave cave. We can make our way down to the bottom of the cave without any wall runs. Even the wider gaps here can be made with normal long jumps. And soon we find a save point. Interestingly, if we use this save point, the prince will actually load in on the lower platform below the save point, which seemingly traps us down here. Keep that in mind. We head through a tunnel and break down a weakened wall. It is now that we see just how difficult the next section is going to be. There are several crumbling wooden bridges in a row. If we want to cross over them without any wall running, we need to perform 3 double jumps in a row. It's even more difficult than it sounds. As we mentioned before, the timing on a double jump when performed from a crumbling platform is even stricter than normal. Not only that, but we can't grab the edge of these wooden bridges, because if we do, the bridge just breaks and falls immediately. The margin for error here is tiny, and we were making attempts at this for hours on end. But finally, the stars aligned, and we nailed all 3 double jumps in a row, only to find that the very next area requires 3 more double jumps in a row. It's worth mentioning that we have a total of 7 sand chambers at this point, but we would need 12 sand chambers minimum for 6 double jumps. Basically, we need a new plan. If we reload the game to a save point before our most recent save point, we can access this thin ledge before the point of no return. Trying to reach this thin ledge from our latest save point would be a lot more awkward due to us loading in on the lower platform under the save point. We can use this thin ledge for a walk in air. We can just jump down beyond the bridges and survive the fall. Only we find out that the next area hasn't loaded in. It turns out that the load trigger for the next area is the tunnel with the breakable wall right before the first bridge. The walk-in airs that we've gotten so far have been too high up to hit that load trigger, so let's try a slightly different strategy. Once again, we need to reload the game to get back to that thin ledge. We stand just right to the ledge behind us so that we don't land on it, and then we jump back. The idea is to use a rewind trick to get a walk in air much lower down. It's very tricky and it can take a good number of sand chambers to pull off. The best attempt we managed used up 5 out of 7 sand chambers. And now we're about level with the tunnel, so now we just need to follow the general route of the tunnel and the bridges. We can even still break the wall like this, just in case that was part of the trigger to load in the next area. As we cross the first 3 bridges, make sure not to go too far out of bounds. Beyond the first 3 bridges, we can walk in air under the ground. We change direction to get towards the next set of bridges. We can keep walking in the air to bypass these 3 bridges, or if you want to play it safe, you can land on the last bridge to ensure we hit a load trigger and then use our last double jump to make it over the last gap. Either way works. There's plenty of intended wall runs coming up, so we're going to use this ledge for yet another walk in air. As long as we follow the general route we would normally take in a casual run, we keep the upcoming areas loaded in when we should, and we can travel all the way to the next save point like this. At first, we thought that if we dropped down here, we wouldn't be able to get back up without a wall run, but thankfully, we were wrong. Also, there's a sand cloud shortly up ahead, and we're going to need it. We need to get to the bottom of this cavern of ladders. A couple of long jumps get us over 2 difficult gaps, but we will need at least 1 double jump. This wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. We enter a reservoir. There's a lot of platforms above us, but to reach any of them, we're supposed to run up this wall. We can get up there by using the same trick that we used in the baths. We take out our sword, kick off the wall, and then use a rewind trick to redirect ourselves towards the wall. From here, we can use either double jumps or a walk in air to reach the sand clouds in the area. And from here, we're also able to swing our way to the exit. We emerge from the well and get our 8th sand chamber. The next few rooms are trap heavy, and there's 1 intended wall run, but a double jump gets us by. The rest is just dodging spinning blades. Right away, we're thrown into a fight against several sand creatures, but if we go through these curtains, they de-aggro. Through this corridor, we see that we need to reach a very high up lever with a wall run. Our first idea was to get a sand creature over here so we could get a damage boost from it. Since the enemies don't ever travel to this room, we had to hit an enemy over and over, slowly pushing it all the way through the corridor. Since the sand creature can only be killed with the dagger, we would use the sword attacks to knock it down, getting it closer and closer to being directly underneath the lever. After the sand creature stood up, we waited for it to attack us, but it just stood there and then teleported away. I would have loved for that to work. Change of plan, we're going back to the redirect trick that we used in the reservoir with our sword out. We kick off the wall with several rewind tricks. Eventually we manage to get enough height to get close to the lever. The issue is the prince won't grab the lever during a vault animation. However, if we use several rewind tricks all in a row in the same spots over and over, it's possible to interrupt the animation the prince is doing at the time and he just drops out of the air. If we get close to the lever and then get the prince to do this drop, the prince will grab the lever during the free fall. He won't even put his sword away. When we finally got this, we used up 7 sand chambers, but since we left the enemies in the previous room alive, we can kill them all for a complete sand refill. Just one more double jump and we are reunited with Pharah, and we proceed to the Hall of Learning. Now that we have Pharah back with us to help with damage boosts, we won't need any of these sand creatures, so we can just kill them all. Seizure warning by the way, because we ended up getting this weird glitch after we vaulted over one of them, and we were stuck like this until the game decided that we just lost. We try again and put all the enemies down this time. Now, the Hall of Learning is one big puzzle, all about reflecting light beams to open doors. The door that leads to the next area is on the ground level, and instead of solving this puzzle, it's actually possible to use a first-person trick whilst dragging the mirrors to just warp straight through the door. This would skip the puzzle entirely, but there's also a sword upgrade we can get if we do solve the puzzle, so we decided to give it a try. The room has 3 floors to it, with a separate light puzzle on each floor. As soon as we drag the first mirror away from the wall on the bottom floor, Pharah goes through a crack behind it, and we can no longer use her for damage boosts. If we did solve the light puzzle on the bottom floor, it would raise the center platform, allowing us to climb it and reach the second floor. The problem with that is that we would need to use a wall run to get on top of it. It is possible to use a series of double jumps to make this climb, but that would use up a lot of sand. Instead, we approach this puzzle a bit differently, in reverse. Basically, when you solve the bottom floor, not only does this provide you the means to climb up to the next floor, but it also creates a light beam on the top floor. We would then move mirrors on the middle and top floors to redirect the light beam to open the door at the bottom to get our new sword. Basically, we're supposed to tackle this puzzle one floor at a time in order from bottom to top. We use a damage boost to reach a high, thin ledge, and then we use a rewind trick to walk in air. Using this, we can reach a ladder in the far corner of the room. This gets us all the way to the third and top floor of the room. Now, even though there's no light beam to reflect yet, since we haven't solved the puzzle on the bottom floor, we still want to position all the mirrors in their correct places ahead of time. There is a lever up here that creates a path to the other mirrors on this floor. We can see some dark scruff marks on the ground that show us where the mirrors need to be. We just need to place them as central on these marks as possible, but it can be fairly precise. We'll need to swing over to the center platform to rotate that mirror downwards as well. We can also use a double jump to reach the secret health upgrade, which we decided to get since our health was getting low, and we can use another double jump to help us get a sand cloud. We backtrack to the same ladder that we used to get up here, and then use it to reach a thin ledge. We use that to get a walk in air, grab this rope, and swing over to the room's second floor. From here, it's easy to climb down to the ground floor. Now we can position the mirrors on the ground floor to create a new beam of light on the top floor. As long as we got all the upper mirrors in the exact right places, this solves the puzzle on the first and third floor at the same time. The interesting part is that there's 2 cutscenes, one for solving the first puzzle that shows the second light beam being created, and the second cutscene that shows the door opening. Since we solved it all at once, the game tries to show these 2 cutscenes back to back. The game gets confused by this, since we weren't meant to be able to do this, and the camera goes out of bounds during the cutscene. We grabbed our new sword, pull the lever, and then move on. Due to the way we solved the previous puzzle, it's possible that Pharah won't come with us to the next area, but to fix that, we save the game at the next save point and then reload that save. Pharah should now be with us, ready to pull a lever for us. This observatory level can be played entirely as intended. There's a couple of sections where wall runs could be used, but we can also just use long jumps instead. The following corridors are filled with traps, but we can get through them casually. We find ourselves in a courtyard. We can climb up using ladders, ropes and poles, but before long, some of these gaps require double jumps. 3 double jumps to be exact. The last one was particularly difficult, as the platform that we wanted to land on was both far away and low down. This consumed all 8 of our sand chambers, but we made it to the lever. There's even a sand cloud behind the door that we opened. The next area is just a bridge from one building to the other with no wall runs. But at the end, we are separated from Pharah once again as we fall into the dungeon. We start the dungeon very high up, and the intended way down is to perform many wall runs in a row all the way around the room until we reach the bottom. Even though we have 9 sand chambers, there is no chance that we would be able to double jump our way down. However, there is a ladder right next to us, and we can use a rewind trick with ladders. We haven't really needed to do it yet, but it's perfect here. It works the same as the ones we've used with the pillars and the thin ledges, only this time we can slide down an invisible ladder all the way to the bottom. We kill what seems like a small army of sand creatures and enter the next corridor. There's another button on the wall, so we break out another vault redirect to activate it and open a door. Behind the door is a sand cloud which we're going to need. We can move these walls closer to each other with these levers, but we can't use wall jumps on these walls without running up the wall first. Luckily, there is a pit in the center of the room, so we use it for a redirected long jump into a double jump to hit the wall and then start the wall kicks. This was easily the most difficult redirected double jump so far. I was trying this for ages. Now that we're up here, the only way to the wooden beam is to double jump over the gap and then kick off the wall. This causes some bats to spawn, but we can kill them easily enough. The next climb is easy as it just requires wall kicks, but then we did need another double jump to reach the pole above us. We swing over to the other side of the room and we grab another sand cloud. Now we run into a bit of a roadblock. There's a button on the right wall, and activating it reveals a platform on the left. Above that is another button which reveals a platform on the right, and this pattern continues for about 5 buttons in total. The idea, of course, is to run up the wall, kick off the button, land on the platform that it reveals, and then repeat this until you're at the top. The platforms are only revealed for a limited time, so this means we're also on a time limit. So far, our alternative to wall running onto buttons is the vault redirect from walls. Each vault redirect would take up 2 sand chambers at minimum, and with 9 sand chambers, we would only be able to perform this 4 times. Not to mention that using the vault method is slower than the usual wall run method, so it would also be extremely difficult to do fast enough even with enough sand. We were stuck here for quite some time. We were just trying things now. We found out that if you perform a rewind trick from a swinging pole, the game just propels the prince miles into the sky, and to his death, of course. However, when we eventually came up with the solution to this, I was quite proud of myself. We need to reload the room first and start again. We do everything that we did the first time, all exactly the same, except we don't kill the bats. There's a reason we mentioned those bats. We want them to chase us all the way up as we climb. We need to be quick though, as the bats can mess up our parkour and knock us out of the air. We killed a few of them first to make them less of a threat, and then continued the climb. Eventually we got to where we reached before. Now we can use the bats to perform a damage boost. We make sure to stand in the center of the platform, otherwise we'll miss the beam above us. And when we finally nailed it, we were home free. We defeat all the enemies and reunite with Pharah yet again. We need to open a door, and the game wants us to wall run to each block. But now that Pharah's back, we just push her towards the platform with the block on top and damage boost up to it. We nearly squash Pharah with the block, push it under the button, use the vault jump redirect to activate the button, and then head through the door. We spend a long elevator ride fighting off a lot more sand creatures, and when we finally get to the top, we need Pharah to get another damage boost to the lever above us. Thankfully, she had recovered enough health to survive our attack. We need to get on top of the hourglass. All it takes is 2 double jumps and 2 long jumps. We're soon swept away into the tomb. We travel down the long spiral staircase, and we need to solve a door puzzle to escape. I forgot how annoying this part was. When we're done, we find ourselves alone in the tomb and without our sword or dagger. Thankfully, just ahead we can solve a light beam puzzle for a new sword, and this sword can defeat the sand creatures without the need for the dagger. We still lost the power of time though, and with it our ability to perform rewind tricks. We break down the door and swing swing over to the next platform. There are several enemies here, and whereas our new sword would make quick work of them, we need one of them alive for the damage boost to the thin ledge above us. Without being able to slow down time, the height from damage boosts is reduced a lot, but thankfully this ledge isn't too high up. We use the pillars and poles to get over this gap, and now we are faced with a wall kick section. We can avoid a wall run by long jumping at an angle into the wall and then wall jumping to the next ledge. But this is where we're stuck. We can't reach the top without a wall run. We can't use any rewind tricks without our dagger, and we can't use wall jumps either. We had a feeling we were only going to get so far without our dagger, and this was it. If only the game hadn't taken the dagger away from us. So, we'll just make sure the game doesn't take it away from us. We load the game back before the door puzzle in the tomb. This was the last time we still had the dagger before we lost it. Solving this door puzzle triggers a cutscene, and it's that cutscene that removes the dagger from us going forward. If we can skip the cutscene, we will still keep our dagger, and to do that, we need to go over a trick we haven't used yet. It's called zipping. If you've seen Prince of Persia speedruns, then you've likely seen this trick already. Basically, we can get zipped large distances if we can perform more than 22 actions in a row and then rewind them all. The game freaks out, and then the prince will be zipped in the direction that we were travelling before those 22 actions. Something as simple as a sword swing followed up by 22 actions and then rewinding it all can send the prince quite far forward due to the momentum from the sword swing. The prince zipping like this even ignores all collision, but still activates load triggers. Of course, performing 22 actions in quick succession in a short time can be quite difficult, but there is a way to make this much easier. We map our mouse wheel scrolling to forwards and backwards movement in the game's settings. So now, as we scroll the mouse wheel up or down, the prince will take several small steps in that direction very quickly. Each step counts as a single action, so racking up 22 actions like this is very easy. We can also use several movements in a row before we start scrolling the mouse wheel to get even more momentum from the zip. These can include things like sword swings, dagger strikes, and we can even jump on the spot for upward momentum as well. So, back to before the door puzzle. We activate the cutscene that shows off the doors. We turn around, back towards the stairs. We stand at the bottom of the first step and perform these actions. Jump, dagger strike, jump. Then we start scrolling the mouse wheel forward for about 4 to 5 seconds. Then we start rewinding straight away. After the game has undone those quick stutter steps, the previous actions will result in a lot of momentum in their respective directions. The 2 jumps will send us up high, and the dagger strike will lunge us forward. As soon as we see the prince leave his feet and zip off the screen, we need to let go of the rewind button. This is because the prince will be free falling immediately following the rewind, and if we rewound for too long, the fall damage would kill us. Instead, we land right inside the tomb, thus skipping the cutscene that takes our dagger away. This works because the tomb level is actually loaded in and stored far off into the distance in the direction that our momentum took us. Now, we could have been using zipping this entire run so far to circumvent a lot of wall runs. Each zip only requires 1 sand after all, and in the any % speedrun category, that is exactly what happens. But for this challenge, we decided to only use zips where absolutely necessary. So, we are now in the tomb with our sword and dagger, but there's a catch. Every single cutscene that we activate from now on will take our dagger away from us. If we solve the light beam puzzle for the new sword, the cutscene of us picking the sword up removes our dagger. The game knows we shouldn't have it, and it uses any future cutscene as a chance to remove it. This means we must avoid all cutscenes from now on. It's like we're fighting the very code of the game now. If we can't get that new sword, we also can't break down the wooden door. There's a simple solution. We move one of the mirrors next to the fence besides the door, and then we vault backwards from it. If we get the angle right, we can grab the edge on the other side of the door, but directly after this door, there's a short cutscene that introduces the next area, and of course, this also removes our dagger. The cutscene only happens if we stand on the edge before the pole swing section, so we just need a way of avoiding that part of the ground. The way to do this is to climb over the fence and hang over the edge. Shimmy over as close to the pole as possible. Now, we need to rotate ourselves so that our back is aiming towards the pole. We can use a first-person trick to achieve this. It's quite precise, as over-rotating will cause us to fall off. We found that it's easier when we have our sword in hand, as this prevents us from shimmying when doing first-person tricks. Once we get the angle, we jump back and grab the pole. The cutscene is skipped. We can kill some enemies here for some sand if we need it, but again, leave one alive for the damage boost. Now we actually need to perform one more zip. It seems as though we could just progress normally along the intended route using rewind tricks, and whereas this is true, we would only trigger another cutscene once we got up there. Instead, when we reach this platform with the water and the pillar, we stand with our backs to this wall, facing towards the structure that we want to reach. We make sure to zoom the camera all the way in before we start. We jump on the spot and then perform 3 guard attacks in a row. This is what the prince does when you try to attack and block at the same time. And then we use the scroll wheel again for about 4 to 5 seconds. If we're too close to the edge, we can have the camera facing away from the edge to ensure that we don't fall off as we scroll. As we rewind, we lose sight of the prince as he zips forward. Eventually, the camera will zoom all the way into the wall where we started. As soon as we see the camera bob upwards, we stop rewinding immediately. Again, this is to ensure we don't take fall damage after the free fall. With that, we land on top of the structure we've been trying to reach this whole time. We can't approach the bridge though, otherwise there will be a cutscene of Pharah running away. Instead, we can either rewind again after the zip to go back to the platform we started on, or we can backtrack there manually. It just requires one double jump if we choose that method. All we wanted from that zip was to hit a load trigger to ensure that the next area loaded in as normal. Now that we're back here, we can use another rewind trick on this pillar, like we did back in the cliff area after the zoo. Using this, we can climb up an invisible pillar and reach the platform where Pharah is. We can use the enemies here for a damage boost to the ledge above, and we parkour our way onward from there. There is a wall jump section here, and we have options. We can either use the bats for a damage boost, or we can just use a vertical zip. This is a prime example of how zips can trivialize this game when you know how. I tell you what, no more zips from now on. The rest of the climb can be done casually, as it's just thin ledges, pole swings and wall jumps. That is until, of course, we need to clear this big gap. We can double jump over it, but in the interest of saving sand, you could also get a walk in air with the thin ledges from earlier and go inside the tower on the other side of this gap. We jump back into a ladder and climb our way to the top. From here on, a lot of the platforming can be done without wall running. This ledge can't be grabbed from a long jump unless you land on the very left edge for some reason, but we can still make it. This is all leading to an interesting wall run into a wall jump to grab a pillar. This pillar is about as far away and as high up as it can be where a wall run would still reach it, but a double jump just barely cannot reach it. We made attempts to reach this pillar with double jumps for over an hour, and the very best attempts fell short every time. There's only one thing for it. We need to perform a triple jump. The premise is similar to all other rewind tricks we've used that use up more than 2 sand chambers. For example, the wall launch from early on, or the low down walk in air that we got in the waterfall level. What makes this one more difficult is that the timing is a lot tighter. We need to stand as far to the left of this ledge as possible, aim the camera towards the pillar, and long jump off the very edge. As we're performing the rewind trick, if the prince just falls out of the air at any point, then this attempt is pretty much dead. This is also why we saved as much sand as we could before we got here, as this triple jump can easily use up all of it. After many attempts, we finally nailed the perfect triple jump. With that, we are on the final stretch of the game. At this point, I was so excited and nervous to be this close to the end of the challenge that I just jumped off this final pillar completely the wrong way. Thank goodness I still had some sand left to rewind that. We trigger a cutscene, but this is the part of the game where we get the dagger back anyway. We kill a whole bunch of sand creatures, stick the dagger into the hourglass, undo the terror we unleashed onto the world, and all that's left to do now is to put the vizier down for good. We have done it. Can you beat Prince of Persia, Sands of Time without wall running? Well, there was that one wall run that we couldn't avoid at the very start of the game. What if there was a way we could go back and try again? Maybe there is a way. We need to think of another way up. Just give me some time. I'm sure we'll come up with something. Oh wait, I have an idea. Check this out. We go into the game's launch options on Steam, and we input the text plus FPS_max space unlimited, and then we boot up the game as normal. This will now cause the game to run on the highest frame rate our hardware will possibly allow. We can see in the top right corner of the screen that the frame rate is now several hundred. We've been playing at 60 FPS all this time, but this high frame rate can have some odd effects on the game, such as if we slowly walk over an edge, the prince will just bounce up and grab the ledge above us. That bypasses the wall run. Seems a bit cheap, but hopefully now you can see why I didn't play the whole game like this. So anyway, back to the question. Can we beat Prince of Persia, Sands of Time without wall running? Yes, you can. Will you play Prince of Persia now, Dad? No, probably not. Thank you all for watching. This was easily one of the most satisfying challenge runs I have ever completed. I need to thank a few people from the Prince of Persia Discord server, especially the Asco88, as they were the one who started this challenge years ago. I am very proud to be able to finish the work they started. If you enjoyed challenge runs like this, then this is the channel for you. Please subscribe, join our Discord server, and follow our Twitch. Also, we've started to live stream some of these challenge runs on this YouTube channel now too. We're live most Saturday evenings UK time, starting with Final Fantasy VII Limits Only. Come join us sometime. Not only that, but we've also opened YouTube memberships for the first time. You can join that if you want to be able to watch these Can You Beat videos early. Speaking of our YouTube members, we already have some amazing people join up. They are Code of Zero, Fister Knightley, Katsuya, Rocket Plod, and Zero Talent. And then our patrons, A Lazy Dragon, Anthony Kermack, LED23, Skirts, and Tor. And finally, our Twitch subs. A Lazy Dragon, Eiley Chan, Argosius, Outy Biscuit 93, Crawling Relsa, Dino 1303, D Stut, Duncan F93, Evolve Pixel, Finger My Bum, Thin Living with a Ghost, Hakey Joey 14, Ham Scoffer, Hair Druid Nuel, Individu, It's Zucifer, Jesus Christ 00 AD, Jimmy Choo, Jin 0505, John Fitz 49, Cami 7, Lacerated Hunter, Lucy B, Mel 3 Phyllis, Mackenzie 1398, Major Vengeance, Mega Chonk Seal, Mel Phyllis, Miss Barbs, Norsecan, Otaku Protector, Prince Curly, Slom's Child Pad 10, Spectrum Z90, Static Joke, Sumbro 77, Talaminoz, 10 divided by 6, Terry and Dare, TG Side Effects, That Chloe is Odd, The Jammy Emperor, The Only Intruder, The Player 96, Threadbird, Tim Zero, Tor ZH, Towster, True DK0, Vital Daffodil, XD Curtis DX, and Zero Talent 63. Thank you everyone. If you're not done watching challenge runs, then what about beating all the Dark Souls bosses in alphabetical order? Or beating Metal Gear Solid without taking any steps? Both of those playlists are linked on screen now. My dad didn't like Metal Gear Solid either.